As I mentioned in the introduction, Micah chapter 6, verse 8 was the university passage for 2017-18 academic year. So it's been on the front of many of our minds for quite some time. Micah 6, verse 8, the prophet asks this question, what does the Lord require of you? But to do these things, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Now, I would like to talk about these three things with an eye toward how we, and by we here, I'm being kind of exclusive, right? I'm kind of thinking as a Christian, how we, as Christians in the West, think about justice issues. Very often, we think about loving justice rather than doing justice. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is we focus a bit more on the retribution, and we want to claim rights, and we want to make sure that our brand, if you will, of justice, which very often we equate with the Founding Fathers' brand of justice, is ensconced legally and pressed forward. Now, there's much of that I agree with, right? I don't think people should be committing murder. I don't think people should be thieving from one another, right? But we're not in a theocracy. So while I think it's a good idea to take a Sabbath, and I've talked about that before, I'm not sure that I want to bring that to a point of like legality that forces people to take a Sabbath. I don't think that's, living in 21st century United States of America, I'm not sure that that's my right. Okay, so I'm not one that wants to make America a theocracy. But very often when we get into this whole kind of law and order business, we think retributively. That is, we think in accordance with retribution. And I don't think that's how God deals with me, so I want to think about justice in different ways. I want to do acts of justice. I think that's what the prophet is telling me to do. But I want to love mercy. In fact, prophets elsewhere pray and hope God will remember mercy in justice, will not lay everything to account of the perpetrator. One of my favorite verses is in the 103rd Psalm, where the writer says, He, speaking of God, He is mindful of my frame. That is, He knows how I'm built. He knows that I am but dust. Recognizing that God understands the kind of the weakness of the human person, and that's helpful for me. And if God deals with me that way, then my goal is to deal with somebody else that way. Now, I'm not always very good at it, and I think about how St. Paul talked about his mission. He writes to Timothy, I believe in 2 Timothy, I believe in chapter 1. And he says the goal of our instruction is love. Now he explains that a little bit more, but he says that's the goal. That's the goal of our instruction, love, from a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere faith. So love that proceeds from those three things. If that's good enough for St. Paul, I think maybe my goal in life should be not just of my instruction, but as one who imbibes the spirit of this lived reality called Christianity, should be love. Love from a pure heart, a sincere faith, and a good conscience. So when I approach Micah 6:8, I really want to be very particular, and this is a place where we practice what's called close reading of the text. We look at it and we examine it for its details. Micah does not say love justice. Not saying he wouldn't have said that, but he didn't say that. He said do justice, perform acts of justice, perform acts of mercy. He said, perform acts of justice, but he says love, mercy, covenant loyalty is another way to translate that word mercy, or loving kindness is another way to translate it. love that. Bind yourself to that. Embrace that. Do the justice, but embrace closely mercy. Now that's my close reading on it. And so as I seek to think about how I prioritize my work and my life, do I want to act justly? I do want to act justly. I do. But more importantly, I want to love mercy. I want to embrace wholeheartedly and completely mercy. I think if I do that, I'll act justly. But I won't necessarily act with mercy if I'm focused on justice, to me. Now try that on for size, think about that, see if that makes any sense to you. It may not. It may not resonate with you, and so forgive the imperfection of my own language, but that makes sense to me. That helps me think about these texts in a way that that balances that whole justice and mercy conundrum. I think that's part of what the prophet's doing. And then, he rounds out that passage by talking about walking humbly with God. Walking humbly with God, I think, kind of stimulates mercy because it reminds me of my own imperfections. I'm not God, not my job. God is perfect. I am far from it. God has dealt with me mercifully when I deserved justice. It's my faith as a Christian, and it's also kind of my analysis of my life. I thankfully haven't gotten what I've deserved. I feel like God has been kind to me. What does that mean for how I treat others? And I think that's part of what Micah is talking about here. So, again, apply that to your practice area. Try it on, think about it, chew on it. You don't have to agree with me, but this is how I process the text and how I think maybe a theologian can speak into the lives of those who are doing work that's related, though different than mine. Okay, we'll be back to talk about some New Testament text in just a minute.